Hello, my name is Diana, and I graduated very young as a psychologist. In my career, many people asked me why I wanted to be a psychologist. I answered the same as everyone answers: to help people, to understand the human brain for job opportunities. But behind those excuses, there is a reason that only my family knows. I want to understand better what I experienced that night, understand my own head, and finally know if all I went through is real or just an invention of a girl with a big imagination, as everyone wants me to believe I was. When it all happened, I was on vacation with my father. He and my mother were on the verge of divorce, so they made up an excuse so that I wouldn't notice. But even though I was young, I already knew everything that was going on. During the day, we both had a great time. We wandered around the city and had a good time at the beach, but the main attraction was about to come. My dream was to see the beach at sunset. So my father decided to take me to the most remote part so we could see it together. When we arrived, everything was as I expected. The sunset was beautiful, and as my dad promised me, that part of the beach was quite hidden. There was literally no one around, or so I thought. Some smoke interrupted my tranquility, and when I turned around, I realized we were not alone. Walking towards where we were coming from, more than 10 people in black robes were walking, carrying a black bag, and they were turning to go in our direction. Without giving me time to think, my father grabbed me and started running toward the deepest part of the beach. I could see how the men in robes warned each other that someone was running and began to come after us. I could feel my dad's speed slowing down until he changed direction. He entered an abandoned shack on the beach, and we both crawled inside to hide. The cabin was terrifying. It was full of drawings and papers scattered everywhere. Was this the cabin of these people? I hid under the table while my father went into the closet. A few seconds later, the door opened and some people came in. They were 4 very tall men, and they were all wearing black robes and masks on their faces. One of them had a blue tunic, and that one had a different mask, much bigger and more imposing. I could see through the holes in the tablecloth as the men looked around, looking for us. Every step they took sounded throughout the hut. The wood creaked under the impact of their massive black boots, and as time passed, the search became more violent. After a few seconds that passed like hours, one of them finally approached the table. The man started removing everything from the tablecloth to pull it out. They were about to find me. I didn't know what these men were going to do to me, but they were definitely going to do something bad. I felt that I had seen too much, that I was not going to be allowed to go home with my father. But before I could be discovered, we all heard a noise from the closet. It was my father who had knocked to distract them. From the tablecloth, I could see the men approaching the closet slowly. I didn't feel they were being careful, but wanted to intimidate my father, making as much noise as possible. Without giving him a chance to fight, the man in blue pulled a huge blade from under his robe and slashed through the cabinet. Behind it, I heard a dry scream from my father. When the man in the blue tunic removed the knife he had stuck in the closet, he told the other men to carry that small closet with my father's corpse inside. And just as they entered, the robed men left. I began to cry inconsolably, but I had to cover my mouth. One of the cultists had returned and walked straight to the table. I was desperate. They would surely do to me what they had done to my father. I was so scared, but at the same time, I couldn't think. I was still in shock from what I had seen. Before the man could see if I was under the table, the man in the blue tunic came up behind him and told him to leave since they only saw my father running. Apparently, they were too far away to see that my father was carrying me. I hid under the table all night, crying in terror, unable to move. They didn't come all night, and when I went out the next day, the police found me and took me to my mother, who came desperately looking for me. Neither my family nor the police believed my story. The police found the cabin where everything happened, but it was empty. There was no closet, no blood, no inhabitants, nothing. It even looked like it had been abandoned for years. I went through several psychologists to understand what had happened that night. A few years later, I found out that there are many cults that perform rituals on the beaches. These rituals are in honor of the sea, sacrificing animals or even human beings. There are days I question if what I experienced was real, but I'm sure it was. My father would never have abandoned me. There is no doubt that when we were young, one of the most fun things to do at the beach was to visit it at night with friends. We didn't plan on causing any trouble. We just wanted to have a good time. None of us deserved what we got that day. During that night, we were all happy. It was our first vacation together, and it suited us just fine, as the year at college had been really tough. We spent the day sleeping in the hotel because of the long trip, and we were ready to have a drink on the beach, watching the sea. We took a bus to the beach, and when we arrived, we were happy to find it empty. We wandered in and even passed the forbidden part in search of a better view. We were comfortable in the place we had found, but suddenly something disturbed us. An intense light was coming from the side of the beach. We thought it was a security guard, so we tried to hide, but the place was wide open, and we were in full view of whoever was driving. In a few seconds, we recognized that it was a Jeep. But because it didn't brake when it saw us, it was clear that the Jeep didn't belong to anyone from security. We tried to see who was driving the Jeep, but couldn't since it had tinted windows. They were probably other people trying to have a good time. We decided to go back to our business, but before we knew it, the Jeep had turned around and was speeding towards us. The closer it got, the more we realized something strange was happening. Not only was the Jeep not slowing down, but it was also speeding up. We all managed to dodge it by jumping out of the way at the last moment before it hit us. and in response, the Jeep turned around, ready to attack us again. We all tried to run as fast as we could, but we were still in the sand, so not only were we getting tired faster, but we were barely moving. The Jeep quickly caught up with us, but instead of trying to run us over, the window opened, and out came a hand with a chain, which hit Jack, who was far behind and unlucky to be closer to the Jeep. When we realized that our friend was no longer running, we turned around to look for him, but he was gone. The Jeep stopped next to him, and the door was closing. We didn't have time to process what had happened when the Jeep had already started up again. And without me being able to protect myself, it was in front of me, about to run me over. I hardly remember anything of what happened next. None of my friends came back to look for me, and I only remember the chain hitting me while I, confused, tried to protect myself. After that, I remember being locked in a trunk. I remember Jack's lifeless eyes pointing at mine in that small space. And then I remember nothing. I woke up on the beach the next night, beaten and in pain. No one was looking for us or knew anything about what had happened. When I got to the hotel, I found out that none of my friends had returned. After reporting everything to the police, they did everything they could to find them, but the case remains open. Not a day goes by that I don't wonder what happened that night. Where are my friends? Why did they do this to us? Who did this to us? Why did they leave only me alive? If there's one thing I've learned over time, it's that I will take those questions to my grave. Have you ever seen something that you felt you should not have seen? Were you in the wrong place at the wrong time and felt you were the victim of something much bigger than yourself? That morning I had argued with my wife, and in an impulsive act of anger, I walked down to the beach. But not the beach, full of people and voices of joy, but to the most deserted part of the beach. The part covered by huge caves that were not family-friendly because children can get hurt. It was only 8 o'clock in the morning, and the day was quite cold and cloudy. Definitely not a day for the beach, but I didn't care. I put my feet on the sand and felt a slight drizzle falling on me. I stood against a huge rock where a small roof was formed to protect me from the rain, and watched as the small drops hit the sea. I sat down and relaxed, stared at the immense sea in front of me. I relaxed and closed my eyes. I was still very sleepy. I just wanted to sleep a little more. When I woke up, I heard the rain falling on the beach. I could see the tide rising and my feet getting wet, but that was not what caught my attention. Surprised, I witnessed someone coming out of the sea and walking towards me. That person was not on the beach, the caverns, or the shore. That person was coming from the bottom of the sea. He had started as a lump coming out of the water, but as he came ashore, his body became more and more noticeable. Regardless of the waves hitting him, his pace was steady and precise, and he was getting closer and closer to me. I wanted to run toward my van, but he was coming from that side and was already too close. He would surely catch up with me. I grabbed a huge stick next to me, and in a battle stance, I waited for him. The closer he came, the more I realized my mistake. His body was huge. The strange being had no facial hair, and its bluish skin was covered with scales. But the strangest thing was that it had no face. It had no eyes or mouth, but it seemed to know where I was. When I had him in front of me, I tried to hit him as hard as I could. But with one hand, he stopped the blow, and with the other, he grabbed me by the neck and hit me against the rock. And then he threw me into the sea. I was very dizzy, but I managed to gather my strength to stand up and run. I thought I could escape from him, but this being moved very easily in the water, and in a matter of seconds, he caught up with me. He grabbed the back of my neck and dragged my face underwater. The ground was littered with small rocks that impacted my face, cutting it. Not satisfied with what he did to me, he lifted me out of the water and threw me back onto the beach. I ran in the direction of my van, and as soon as I got in, I realized how close the being was. He was no longer walking, he was running to me. The van wouldn't start, and crying, I watched as he got closer and closer. In my last attempt, when he was right beside me, the van started, and I accelerated as fast as I could, leaving this strange being behind me. When I got home, I hugged my family in tears. I never talked about it, never told anyone what I saw. Maybe someday I will, but I'm not ready to. I don't know what that being was, and I don't need to know. Some things are better left at the bottom of the sea. As always, thank you for watching. Please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and thank you for being a part of our community.